We're about to begin the services for Mr. Robert A. Price, and we'd like to welcome everyone here, as well as those of you that are viewing the service online. And for those of you that are viewing the service online, please remember to sign our online guest book. And just a gentle reminder for those of you present here at the chapel, if you have a cell phone with you today, to please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. Officiating at our service this afternoon is Rabbi Michael Zedek.
Esayin el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz. I will lift up mine eyes unto the mountains. From whence shall my help come? My help comes from the Eternal, who made heaven and earth. God will not suffer your foot to be moved. The one that keeps you will not slumber. Behold, the one that keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Eternal is your keeper. God is your shade upon your right hand. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Eternal shall keep you from all evil. God shall keep your soul. God shall guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever. He has achieved much, who has lived well, laughed often, and loved with full heart, who has gained the respect of the wise and the trust of the young, who has filled a place, accomplished some task, who has left the world better than he found it, who has appreciated the true and the beautiful, who has looked for the good in others and given of the good he had, whose life was inspiration, whose memory must now become a benediction, a blessing. And with blessing in mind, I invite Marc Taylor, Nicole's husband, to share a reading.
This is a poem called The Dash. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend, and he referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more. And love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? This is Robert, my father-in-law. I think he lived a good dash. I think everyone here knew him longer than me, but he touched me. He loved me. And I can see from all the people that he met, that he touched, that he spoke with, the strangers the people he was close with. He loved living his dash, and he loved the people that he met. I'm so grateful. Thanks, Dad.
The dash, of course, a more recent piece of poetry. This a very ancient one. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, v'ino deshe yar bitzeni, al mei menuchot, yinahaleni. An old translation is in your announcement. If you wish, you're most welcome to join me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This afternoon, we're going to be hearing tributes from Cousin Morton, Brother Michael, daughter Marla, son-in-law Kevin, and daughter Nicole, and then I will have the privilege of bringing a conclusion, a coda, to those reflections. Morton? So, Michael, please.
It is a great photograph of my brother, and the one on the brochure is also. Thank you. I can't begin to tell you that the two photographs make me uplifted rather than down at this moment of sadness. So today we say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet as we say farewell to my brother. Robert and I had our differences. However, in June of 2014, on the day that we buried our Aunt Donna, we were fortunate enough to again hug one another, mindful that tomorrow is not promised to anyone. It was a chance to hold a loved one tight. So if you're waiting for tomorrow, why not do it today? You surely will regret the day that you didn't take that extra time for a smile, a hug, a kiss, just to hold your loved ones close and whisper in their ear. We grew up a very close family. In fact, the 5 Price families and Grandma Price lived within several blocks of one another on the south side of Chicago. There was never a household that wasn't within reach for lunch or to go to after school. In our apartment, Bob and I shared a bedroom, while Grandma Stein and Uncle Marvin, fresh from the Army, lived in the 3rd bedroom. Alas, after Grandma went to live with Aunt Ida and Uncle Marvin married Aunt Esther, we still didn't get separate bedrooms as our parents turned our bedroom at that time into what they then called a den. The legacy of our combined families was one that Bob held together a lot more than I did. Like our mother, he maintained the family ties with both the Steins and the Prices. I know him as a warm, embracing, connecting person who connected the generations. I'm reminded of a Devar Torah a few weeks ago on Kitetse by Rabbi Jacobs, who said, Kitete is when one leaves. And when one leaves with the goodness and the blessings and the joy that he created in the family, he leaves with great memories. My brother, you'll excuse me, but my brother was Bobby to me all my life, and then he was Bob, and then he was Robert. And it's when I mentioned to Don Kustin, who lived on the third floor of our apartment, I saw him the other day, he only referred to Bobby, because he was Bobby in all those years. My brother's love and devotion to his parents, to Ruth, to his children, especially to his grandchildren, Julian, Jordan, and Roxy, was boundless. And while we bonded in conversations about the prospects of the Democratic Party and the stock market, it was his descriptions of his daily times with Julian that were foremost in his mind. And as Nicole and Marla have so returned their parents' love, so Robert and Ruth gave so much of themselves to the care of our parents and to Ruth's mother, Adelaide. Over so many years, they cared for them. Together, Bob and Ruth prolonged the lives of our parents in a loving and caring way with extraordinary energy, and I believe much to their own personal detriment. They had the joy of taking care of them, but they spent a lot of their lives taking care of them. This past Wednesday, as many of us gathered in Robert's room, a young Chabad emissary appeared as if sent by some divine power to shake the Sukkot, Luvav, and Etrog with us. Where he came from, how he arrived in that room, I don't know. But Nicole found him in the lobby and brought him in there. It was something destined. It was something beshert. And I had the memorable privilege to hold Robert's hand and perform the mitzvah of the lulav. What a fitting way to conclude our physical relationship in this manner. Now it's up to all of us to hold his cherished memory and carry it forward to keep his goodness alive. Zicharon livracha, may his memory be for a blessing.
Thank you all for being here for my dad. What? Oh, okay. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word often used in yoga that means nonviolence. This is something that has always resonated with me, and the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about what to write for my dad. Ahimsa, that is, not the yoga part, which I advised him to do numerous times. He was a compassionate, loving soul. He spent the majority of his years as a vegetarian, never wanting to hurt animals. Even as much as we tried to get him to try Kevin's best steaks, he never deviated. He always saw through the eyes of others. When I would get fired up and upset with someone, he would always try to get me to see the situation through the other's perspective. to be rational and lead with empathy. As a little kid, I remember driving with him to his office for the donuts, and so Nicole and I could Xerox different parts of our bodies. His proudest moment was the fact that we could make it from garage to office in 8.33 seconds, the exact length of Bye Bye Miss American Pie. I also have incredible memories of him running from our house in Morton Grove to the Art Institute downtown. I didn't think too much of it at the time, except how crazy it was that I was happy to be in the car picking him up and not on foot. But through the years, we would run together and he would give me pointers as I trained for my own marathons. He would always hold me accountable for running past our stopping point and our goals, not an inch behind it. He used to drag us to art museums on the weekends. It drove me bananas, taking me away from precious friend time. But in the end, I became an art major. Thank you, Dad, for those enriching experiences. As I had kids of my own, he took them in with unbelievable warmth and endless love. Driving them to preschool, taking them on trips to museums, the list goes on. Finding experiences that they could forever remember. They made him so happy, and he created lifelong memories that they'll hold on to. My mom was his anchor, the love of his life. Married 56 years, she was his beautiful, forever young Ruth. He never missed an anniversary or birthday with flowers and a thoughtfully hand-picked card. It was always the little things that brought him joy and honor. He always wanted things to be peaceful, even towards the end when he was in so much pain. He never complained. He was just happy hearing mine and the kids' voices and knowing that there were smiles on our faces. He was a gentle, sweet man, always making people feel good. These are the words that have been echoed by many the past few days. He taught me the true meaning of loving unconditionally, through his love for his family, his friends, and everyone around him. This is a gift that will stay with me forever. Love you, Dad.
So, guess I'm gonna get this over with now. Excuse me. So I've been a part of this family for 20 years. First meeting Ruth and Robert shortly after Marla and I began dating. I can say with specific conviction that I was part of the family, because from that very first meeting, even though it was well before Marla and I would get married, it's exactly how he made me feel. I thought this was gonna be a lot easier. Okay, give me one of these. In the end, I learned Robert was a man who led with his feelings, his emotional side. Now, there's many sides about being emotional. It's not screaming or yelling emotional as you might think, but rather thoughtful, meaningful, caring were the hallmarks of Robert. What struck me about him from the beginning is his true empathetic nature. He really felt where you were coming from. I can say that in 21 years of knowing the man and witnessing the emotional side of a man, I never once saw him raise his voice or get upset. Sure, he got annoyed and, things would bother him, but I felt super blessed to enter into someone's life who quite obviously realized what was important to him. It was being there now, with you, with me, in this moment. That's all he wanted. For those of you who knew him or had a conversation with him, think back to one that you remember. Robert was probably one of the greatest listeners I've ever met in my life. Think to a time when you're speaking with him. And I bet it's difficult to remember when having him speak over you or try to get his point of view in or failing to register what you were trying to communicate. He was a perfect example of that human phenomenon where you remember mostly how you feel leaving an interaction, not actually what was said. I always felt he heard me. I felt listened to. I never felt him do anything to try to impart his point of view onto me. I felt that he was just happy to be there in this moment, right now. Looking back, it was just a remarkable feeling. In today's world where it's so often about me or trying to squeeze in your side or your point of view or checking your phone to see if there's something more important than the person in front of you, he took himself to that place where you were. He felt what you felt. He did this, I believe, to seek a better understanding and to share your pain and share your point of view. We never discussed it, but I know this was a personal journey he went on to remake himself to the people he loves, from a driving, hardworking provider for his family early in his life to a cheerleader, an advocate. His joy was your joy. His happiness was seeing you happy. And at the core, if you knew him, you just knew he was rooting for you. I think sometimes I took that for granted. It was so consistent, so persistent, his love, his feeling that he genuinely just was not phoning it in. It's not about saying the right words, but actually feeling them and living them. He just wanted the best for us. Speaking of phoning it in, this was certainly an invention he loved. I could not understand in my 20s with Marla why he would call so often. What does he want now? I would ask, seeing the phone ring for the second, third time in a day. I realized now he didn't want anything. He just wanted to know that he was there to support her and to help us along, and for us not to forget that he's there, and he's there at the exact right time whenever she needed him. Having my own daughter now, I can certainly understand where he was coming from. As a parent, you're just looking to be a part of their world. You just want to be a meaningful part of their life. And this is the gift of perspective that I enjoy now. And I can see clearly with this perspective that he wasn't calling for his benefit or to satisfy some need on his side, but rather to make sure he didn't miss an opportunity to be helpful, to feel what she was feeling to help her through. Looking back now, it's so clear it's just something that was just innate in who he was, and something we all likely could benefit from more a little bit in this world, this unconditional, genuine support. I think he's more human in that way than anyone I've ever known. Being that emotional, you would think it'd translate to being upset or bombastic, but that would do nothing to serve the person on the other side of the table, so why go there? He was as cool as a cucumber. Speaking of cucumber and being a vegetarian, that is. See how I did that? Being a vegetarian is consistent with this view of who he is as a person. Imagining what the animals must feel was enough to give up meat for the vast majority of his life. I imagine what my life would be without meat. But he's helping to ground me in the point of view that there's another thoughtful side of the equation. What would the animal's life be like if it wasn't killed? That's just who he was. The most poignant example of his generosity was what he did for his own mother. When I first joined this family, and I lived in Chicago and we were here, weekends were pretty much off limits. Those were times that he spent with his mom. I quickly realized that every weekend without fail, he was taking care of his mother, not to mention all the things he needed to do during the week. From what I witnessed, Robert was the phone call Sylvie would make when she needed something. And that phone rang a lot. And he was there, and I realized he didn't do this out of obligation, but rather he likely put himself in her shoes, imagining how she's feeling. And of course, he needed to be there to help. How could he not? Is there another choice? How would she feel if he wasn't there? If not me, then who? This framing, this of course there is no other thing more important than being there, really sat with me, and something I aim to emulate in my life with my kids. His love for Ruth was also couched in being there. I know he probably felt like he was around her too much, but she was just home. She was just home for him. Where else would he be? I can see now that if he spent too much time away from her, it would mean risking not being there for when she needed him. That's why he was always there. And that was him. On call, ready, present. And that's how I choose to remember him as well. The greatest lesson he taught me and many of us was not anything he said or did, but rather how he acted. How he chose the path he walked while I was here, and how he showed us what it all means to truly subordinate yourself to others. And for that, I'm forever better and forever grateful.
So many beautiful things have been said about my dad today. He would have loved it. So I'm gonna lighten the mood a little bit and start by doing that. My dad started doing that a few months ago. Mark and I asked him about it one day, and he said it was his way of checking in with himself. So on Friday, after he left us, I decided that I'll be tapping my wrist regularly as a way to remind myself to check in with myself, in a silly little way to remember my dad. Thank you everyone for being here today to honor my dad, Robert Price, Bobby, as many of you knew him. Flowers. My dad loved flowers. We got the extra bright ones today. He loved all kinds and all colors, especially the bright ones. He used to bring flowers home all the time to decorate the house. My dad lives on in me through every flower that I see. Animals. My dad loved animals. So much so that he was a vegetarian for most of his life, as you've heard today. And he never ever cheated on it. He never wavered on his ethics about this. He was kind to living things always. Clocks. My dad loved clocks. When I was growing up, he had old antique pendulum clocks all over our basement. Really, and they were all broken. He had about 20 of them. He tinkered around with them and he fixed them up, and he would run them all simultaneously when they were fixed, all of them clicking and chiming at different times. My dad could fix anything. When I was growing up, my mom and dad scouted out lots of antiques on the weekends. When we weren't at the art museums that my sister mentioned, we were at antique shops, which I liked about as much as she liked the art museums. But my mom and dad bought all these amazing pieces of old furniture, which they fixed, refurbished, and polished, and that became the furniture in our home, adding their own personal touch to our home. Travel. My dad loved to travel. My dad and mom went to Nepal and China and India and Canada and all over the US, to name a few places, when I was growing up. We took family trips to Jamaica and Israel and Italy, and of course, another great childhood memory, lots and lots of weekend trips to Grand Rapids to see our Michigan family. My dad has left us, and he took part of me with him, but he also left part of himself behind and now lives in my heart and on my wrist. He was the first one up at our wedding last year, ready to make a toast before anyone else. My dad loved Mark, my husband, and was so happy that we found each other. It's been a very difficult summer. My dad's health has been declining for quite a while, but most recently things changed for him so very fast. He was so strong during this long illness that slowly took over his body and his mind. He had so much pain and he rarely complained. So much so that many people didn't even realize that he was sick until the very end. I'd like to share some memories of my dad with you. When I was growing up, my dad worked a lot. One of my favorite things was going to the office with him on Sundays. I loved it. I forgot about the Xerox machine. I felt so important seeing my dad at his work and being part of what he did during the day when he wasn't with us. One of my dad's favorite stories to tell was something that many of you have probably heard if you've known my dad for a long time. It's that crazy story about the day he cut school with his friend Jeff. They were riding one of those Navy Pier cruise ships through downtown Chicago, and they were sailing under one of the big brown bridges where the streets cross over the river. As the boat approached, my dad suddenly heard his name being screamed from above. He looked up in amazement to see his mom, my grandma Sylvia, standing on the bridge, waving her arms like a crazy person and screaming, "Bobby, why aren't you in school today?" It's the most random, unlikely experience, which makes it so funny and ironic. And I think that my dad was incredulous about it his entire life, which is why he continued to share it all with us until the very end. My dad was a pilot, and growing up, we used to spend lots of Sunday afternoons flying small 4-person planes over Chicagoland and the surrounding area. I always loved flying over Great America and seeing the roller coasters from the sky. He even took my mom on a trip to Toronto on one of his longer flights. My dad taught me to be a strong businesswoman and excellent fair negotiator. We always looked at both sides, figuring out the best possible solution for everyone to get the best possible result. He taught me to get things done, to ask for what I want, and to be persistent until I could find the right person who could help me with what I needed. He taught me to take care of my stuff, keeping things clean and in good condition. My dad also taught me to drive a stick shift car. As I learned, we spent lots of afternoons driving around the parking lot in his little Fiat convertible, which I loved. And that's been a hugely important part of my life, as most of my cars and the cars of important people in my life have always been stick shift. And I've got my new car chrome nails on for you today, Daddy. My dad loved my nails. My dad also loved to help people. Kevin, that was such a beautiful tribute about that. When we were out, he talked to everyone and made friends everywhere. He was always available and often helped people in the condo building where he lived with my mom. You may know that my dad suffered from Lewy body dementia, a very common yet unrecognized form of dementia. My dad was diagnosed very recently, only last May, even though he had been suffering for years. As a gift to the world and a way to continue my dad's legacy of helping others, we have donated his brain tissue to the Rush University Medical Center Lewy Body Research Team. This enables my dad to live on by helping the doctors get a bit closer to understanding and hopefully eradicating this disease. It's an extra special way to turn his pain into beauty, and we are beyond honored to be able to make that happen. I love you always, Daddy.
I'm sure you'll concur we've heard much, and movingly, substantial evidence to support a Talmudic dictum, which is words that come from the heart enter the heart. As for my brief coda, I promise, a brief coda, it likely won't surprise that upon leaving our family meeting Friday, I began to reflect on how I might organize this brief and insufficient tribute. With that mindset, I drove by a now closed restaurant whose sign proclaimed, "Available for simchas only." By the way, it was an Italian restaurant, so what it was doing with... That struck me as intriguing, and in some deep way, both a bit right and a bit wrong. To wit, Robert was a good, strong part and partner in our lives. And of course, all that embraces the some 56 years with Ruth and their harvest of blessing, with Nicole and her Marla with Kevin as well, maybe especially being Poppy to grandchildren Julian, Jordan, and Roxy. And because of his impact, There were simchas to remember, and there will be those yet to come. But we also know that life has a different rhythm, a more complex pattern, one that includes no shortage of disappointments and darkness as we journey to its inescapable and universal conclusion. Such is why the core test of character is what we do, how we respond to that challenge. For life, every life, includes both light and darkness, which brings to mind my once frequent conversations with Robert. For the consistent thread, no matter the particulars of topic, question, dispute, or concern, was always, how might he be a bridge builder, a peacemaker, a connector of hearts? For Robert was devoted to and captured by the conviction that even when plans might not be working the way one would prefer, there must be something, some things that we could do. No surprise then, in a world too full of cynicism and neglect, I cherish those discussions and shall miss the encounters with his caring spirit. And that suggests a potential moment of light. Light against the darkness of these more recent days and too many days of illness. We all die, but not just in a final moment. Rather, always over time, a lifetime. However, the disease that took Robert has a surplus of cruelty in its progression. Nonetheless, it happens, even if it be only happenstance, not unlike the waving of the lulav as a final mitzvah, that Robert expired, and we gather during the Jewish festival of Sukkot, the oldest continuing Thanksgiving festival in the world. And that is a rich and appropriate metaphor for us, to give thanks for who he was and what he did, and for what is now required of and from us. Simply put, we were more because Robert Price was part of our lives. We are more because that is still true. Not the way we want, just the way it is. And that means, Zichrono Livracha, his memory indeed, just as his life, will be a source of inspiration and blessing among us. As for now, a miracle is over. A unique and precious human being is no more to our sight. A new miracle begins. Our tradition calls it shalom, peace. Amen. If you would please rise. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachach Kenfei Shechina, Im Kedoshim Utorim, Kezohar Rakia Masirim. Et Nishmat Reuven ben Belvel Vesara Shalach LaOlamo. Bala Rachamim, Yitzro B'tzrachim Shmato, Adonai Chun Nachalato. Ve'yanuach v'shalom v'mishkavo, v'nomar. Amen. O God, full of compassion, you who dwells on high, grant perfect rest unto the soul of Robert A. Price, who has departed from this world. God of mercy, bring him into your presence, and that his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou his possession, may his repose be peace, and let us say, Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet. Praised are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, a righteous judge. The end of a great performance in this city, it is not at all unusual for there to be a standing ovation. In Jewish tradition, it's called the Kaddish. If you would please join with me. Yit gadal v'yit gadash shemei rabbah Bi'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehei shmei rabba mivarach le'olam ulmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, shmei dekudsha prichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who makes peace in the highest heavens bring peace to all who mourn, comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
The Shiva will be observed today at the Ancient Tree Clubhouse that's at 12, the Court of Harborside in Northbrook, immediately following the service today until 5 p.m. And then we'll resume on Monday from 3 to 6 p.m. at the residence of Ruth Price at 3, the Court of Harborside, Unit 204 in Northbrook. The family has asked memorial contributions to be made to either Mishkan Chicago or the Lewy Body Dementia Association. And this information is listed in the service folder you received today. And for those of you viewing online, the information is also on our website. And I'd also like to encourage people to share your personal condolences and stories of Mr. Price at ChicagoJewishFunerals.com or on Legacy.com. This does conclude the service. You may exit through the side doors, folks.
Only on Zoom.
You got it, deal.